Although the media has played a role in the United States since the nation's founding, in the late 1960s, changes, like in so many areas of American society during that time period, were in store. Technology itself was prompting many of those changes as the television would become the primary way that citizens received their news. Thus, the previous means by which individuals understood the world around them, namely the radio, newspapers, and magazines, would begin to see their role diminished. The advent of television would have far-reaching consequences on American political, cultural, and economic life, not all of which were positive, but the sophisticated users of television media would reap tremendous benefits during this time period. No one was more sophisticated at using this new medium than the campaign team of John F. Kennedy, as television would create the reality around which the viewers would perceive him. Oddly enough, however, it was Kennedy's opponent in the 1960 presidential campaign, Richard Nixon, who first effectively used television to his advantage. The year was 1952, and Nixon had been accused of accepting illegal campaign donations in his run for vice president. Amid rumors that Dwight D. Eisenhower, at the top of the ticket, would drop him from the race, Nixon gave a speech on September 23rd that changed history.
So how about that Nixon?
I trust him as far as I can throw him.
He sounds like a used car salesman.
He is running for vice president and giving a speech later.
My fellow Americans, I come before you tonight as a candidate for the vice presidency and as a man whose honesty and integrity has been questioned. Now, the usual political thing to do when charges are made against you is to either ignore them or to deny them without giving details. I believe we've had enough of that in the United States, particularly with the president and administration in Washington, D.C. To me, the office of the vice presidency of the United States is a great office, and I feel that the people who've got to have confidence in the integrity of the men who run for that office and who might obtain it. It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Trisha, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all the kids, love the dog. And I just wanted to say this, right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
One other thing I probably should tell you, because if I don't, they'll probably be saying this about me too. We did get something, a gift, after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our 2 youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore saying they had a package for us. We went down to get it. You know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas. Black and white, spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep him.
Wow, I have never seen a political candidate speak so openly about his personal life.
That speech makes him look like a real person.
It's almost as if I were transported into his living room.
He had me at Cocker Spaniel.
But what about the allegations of his financial misdoings?
Oops, forgot about that part.
It all kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Can't we just let him keep the dog?
Regardless of how Nixon's performance may appear, the speech electrified support for his maintaining on the Republican ticket, and it revitalized his political career. Specifically, viewers were attracted to the humanizing comments about his dog and family. Very few remembered the original political scandal, but instead were drawn to the depiction of Nixon as a husband and father. Forever known as the Checkers speech, it set the playbook for future public apologies by politicians who attempt to get a second chance from the voters.
8 years later, the stage was set. The first televised presidential debate was scheduled for September 26, 1960, and it pitted the sitting Vice President Richard Nixon versus a junior senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy. Prior to the debate, polls showed a close race between the two, with a slight edge for the more experienced Nixon. History was made, however, as a national audience of voters received for the first time a chance to see the candidates side by side in a competitive format. In the video of the debate, Kennedy appeared tan, rested, and ready, while Nixon looked tired, haggard, and shift. Indeed, Kennedy had been campaigning in California in the open air prior to the debate and had used makeup to enhance his appearance. Nixon had refused makeup, sweated visibly on screen, and looked to have a 5 o'clock shadow. In some of the polls taken after the debate, data suggested that those who had seen the debate on television believed that Kennedy had won, while those who had listened to it on the radio believed Nixon had won. 2 months later, Kennedy would go on to win the election in November in one of the closest in American history, no doubt aided by the first televised presidential debate.
Senator, the Vice President in his campaign has said that you were naive and at times immature. He has raised the question of leadership. On this issue, why do you think people should vote for you rather than the Vice President?
Well, the Vice President and I came to Congress together in 1946. We both served in the Labor Committee. I've been there now for 14 years, the same period of time that he has, so that our experience in our government is comparable. Secondly, I think the question is, what are the programs that we advocate? What is the party record that we lead? I come out of the Democratic Party, which in this century has produced Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Roosevelt, and Harry Truman, and which supported and sustained these programs which I have discussed tonight. Mr. Nixon comes out of the Republican Party. He was nominated by it. And it is a fact that through most of these last 25 years, the Republican leadership has opposed federal aid for education, medical care for the aged, development of the Tennessee Valley, development of our natural resources. I think Mr. Nixon is an effective leader of this party. I hope he will grant me the same. The question before us is, which point of view and which party do we want to lead the United States?
Mr. Nixon, would you like to comment on the statement?
I have no comment.
Now, in his news conference on August 24th, President Eisenhower was asked to give one example of a major idea of yours that he adopted. His reply was, and I'm quoting, "If you give me a week, I might think of one. I don't remember." Now, that was a month ago, sir, and the president hasn't brought it up since. I'm wondering, sir, if you can clarify which version is correct. The one put out by the Republican campaign leaders or the one put out by President Eisenhower?
I would suggest, Mr. Manicure, that if you know the president, that was probably a facetious remark. I would also suggest that, insofar as the statement is concerned, that I think it would be improper for the President of the United States to disclose certain instances in which members of his official family had made recommendations, as I have made them through the years to him, which he has accepted or rejected. The President has always maintained very properly so that he is entitled to get what advice he wants from his cabinet, from other advisors, without disclosing that to anyone, including, as a matter of fact, the Congress. Now, I can only say this. Through the years that I have sat in the National Security Council, I have been in the cabinet. I've met with the legislative leaders. I've met with the president when he made the great decisions with regard to Lebanon, Quemoy and Matsu, other matters. The president has asked for my advice. I've given it. Sometimes my advice has been taken, sometimes it has not. I do not say that I have made the decisions, and I would say that no president should ever allow anyone else to make the major decisions. The president only makes the decisions.
Well, I'll just say that the question is our experience. And the question is also what our judgment is of the future, and what our goals are for the United States, and what ability we have to implement those goals. Abraham Lincoln came to the presidency in 1860 after a rather little-known session in the House of Representatives, and after being defeated for the Senate in 58, and was a distinguished president. There's no certain road to the presidency. There are no guarantees that if you take out one road or the other, that you will be a successful president. I have been in Congress for 14 years. I have voted in the last 8 years, and the Vice President was presiding over the Senate and meeting his other responsibilities. I have met decisions over 800 times on matters which affect not only the domestic security of the United States, but as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, The question really is, which candidate and which party can meet the problems that the United States is going to face in the 60s?
Holy guard.
If we fail to move ahead, if we fail to develop sufficient military and economic and social strength here in this country, then I think that the tide could begin to run against us. And I don't want historians 10 years from now to say, these were the years when the tide ran out for the United States. I want them to say, these were the years when the tide came in. These were the years when the United States started to move again.
I agree with Senator Kennedy's appraisal generally in this respect. The question of communism within the United States has been one that has worried us in the past. It is one that will continue to be a problem for years to come.
Americans have always had an interesting attitude towards notions of aristocracy and familial wealth. On the one hand, the American Revolution and our attempt at democracy is an effort towards eliminating European-style elitism. Simultaneously, though, human nature in any society lends itself to an adoration of wealth, glamour, success, and beauty. The Kennedy family understood how to capitalize on that latter. Television then became the perfect medium to capture the image of a young, good-looking, prosperous, and happy family. Pictures of the Kennedys playing football, on the beach on vacation, and of a succession of brothers happily married to beautiful wives, raising adorable children, all created a mystique around the Kennedys that had many admirers and a few detractors. This mystique reached its height, of course, with the elevation of John F. Kennedy to the presidency and his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, to First Lady. Their youth and sense of style contrasted sharply with the previous occupants of the White House, the dour and elderly Eisenhowers, while the presence of children for the first time in 50 years was of tremendous interest to the country. For her part, the First Lady raised funds and took charge of extensive renovations of the White House mansion itself. A television special detailing those changes further enlivened American interest in the presidency and was for many the first glimpse inside the building. Others criticized the attention given to the visuals of the Kennedys as a regrettable triumph of style over substance. To these critics, JFK's youth meant inexperience, and the fawning attention paid by the press was too close to Hollywood-style celebrity. For most Americans, particularly after JFK's death, the pictures of the Kennedys on their television screen evoke the idea of a modern-day Camelot with a prince and princess in an almost fairy tale, a dream that was shattered violently one November afternoon.
While Kennedy would move into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and become the 35th President of the United States, Nixon was left to ponder the next step of his political career. He ran for governor of California in 1962, but was defeated again. In November 1962, he gave his last press conference to the California press and uttered these famous last lines.
I leave you gentlemen now, and now you will write it. You will interpret it. That's your right. But as I leave you, I want you to know, just think how much you're going to be missing. You won't have Nixon to kick around anymore, because, gentlemen, this is my last press conference.
Nixon had given a 15-minute monologue that was angry, pitiful, and off balance. He looked finished as a political candidate, and what did him in was his former friend, the television, which now seemed to depict him as a rejected, lonely loser.
Had a lot of fun. A lot of fun. You've had an opportunity to attack me, and I think I've given as good as I've taken. Last point. I leave you gentlemen now, and you will now write it, you will interpret it, that's your right. But as I leave you, I want you to know, just think how much you're going to be missing. You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore. Because, gentlemen, this is my last press conference, and I hope that what I have said today will at least make television, radio, the press recognize that they have a right and a responsibility that if they're against a candidate, give him the shaft. But also recognize if they give him the shaft, put one lonely reporter on the campaign who will report what the candidate says now and then. Thank you, gentlemen, and good day.
In contrast to the deaths of President Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the assassination of John F. Kennedy was almost a shared experience by the American public. Because of television, the nation learned of the shooting with startling speed as local stations broke into daytime programming with the news of the event. Despite the absence of 24-hour news networks like CNN and MSNBC, not to mention the internet or social media, most Americans learned that something had gone terribly wrong in Dallas within an hour of the bullets being fired. Misinformation, such as reports of Vice President Lyndon Johnson having also been wounded, plagued the accounts early on, but overall the media did a tremendous job reporting the event without the technology of the modern era. Since there were not countless channels and websites available to news consumers, most received the official news from either NBC or CBS. The most famous report was delivered by veteran CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash apparently official. President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and becoming the 36th President of the United States.
There were some fears and concerns in Dallas that there might be demonstrations, at least, that could embarrass the president, because it was only on October the 24th that our ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, was assaulted in Dallas, leaving a dinner meeting there. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
The presidential motorcade through Dallas and the eventual assassination were not filmed by any media outlet. Viewers were spared the actual footage of the president's death until the release of a private citizen's home video a decade or so later. The investigation, manhunt, and capture of the alleged assassin were covered breathlessly by the networks. Viewers were glued to the screen as information concerning the life and activity of one Lee Harvey Oswald were disclosed. Thus, while citizens were coping with their grief and worrying about the future of the country, questions swirled around the nation about the prospect of a conspiracy to kill the president, the connection of Oswald to the Soviet Union and/or Cuba, and of a lengthy trial and sentencing. All those concerns were silenced on November 24th, just 2 days after the assassination. While Oswald was being moved from one jail to another, Jack Ruby, a local Dallas nightclub owner, shot and killed Oswald in the police station. This was a shocking development, but it was all the more so considering that it occurred on live television.
Basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to